my dentist the other day. We go back a long way, and I'm worried that he might be thinking of retiring. It's hard to talk with a dental probe in your mouth, but I managed to mumble. So what do you think of the future of generosity? He sat up, stared at me, and blurted out, "The future is bleak. My kids are going to have it hard. They're going to suffer. There is no room for generosity." I immediately got a flashback to a time in my adolescence when I was devouring science fiction novels, and my favorite ones were about dystopia. Worlds gone horribly wrong, stories of survival in the aftermath of environmental and political disaster. Rebels fighting for a better world. I thought my dentist was being excessively pessimistic, so I turned to some younger people and I asked them the same question. To my surprise, I found that many of them were thinking along the same lines. I heard deep concerns about the environment, wars, political instability, dystopia. But the response that stopped me in my tracks was, future. What future? I have a hard time picturing it. If we can't imagine a future, how can we imagine leaving a legacy? And why is it so hard for some people to picture a concrete future? I started to dig. The 2017 Deloitte Millennial Survey shows that many young professionals are worried about what's going on in the world, and they're also concerned about their job security. Things are moving so fast, it's hard to imagine how our lives will be transformed by technology in the next couple of years, let alone the distant future. And humans are hardwired to respond to short-term problems. We're very good at jumping out of the way of an oncoming car, but not so good at dealing with climate change. That's according to Harvard psychology professor Dan Gilbert. He also says we've learned a new trick. In the last couple of million years, our brains can now look ahead and picture something happening in the future, like an upcoming dental appointment or even our retirement. But we've just started to learn this trick. It's a new adaptation in the animal kingdom, and some of us have adapted to it a lot better than others. I'd say I'm looking at many of those early adapters right here in the room today. We're strategic charitable gift planners. We can picture the future. We get together to talk about it. And when we do, there's often a common theme that emerges, and that is the inevitability of change. Yes, change is a given, and change is often necessary. But there are at least two things in the future that won't change. And I'm not talking about death and taxes. The first thing that won't change in the future is the need the world has for generosity. The need for generosity will always be there. It may look different, more complex, but it will definitely be there. Many of the causes that will be crucial in the future will reflect where we've got to because of our actions today. The second thing that won't change in the future is the need we humans have to connect, to belong, to be part of a community that in the future will be broader, more global, more diverse. It's a need that compels us to share, to tell stories. We look for meaning in our lives and purpose. So how can we tap into these interrelated needs, the need for generosity, the need to connect and have purpose, and stimulate thinking about what legacy giving means for the future? Hasn't legacy giving always been about planning to change the world for the better? Everybody here gets that, right? Of course you do. But are we working strategically enough to hone that message so that it resonates with others? As plan-giving professionals, we often have to fight for the space to cultivate future generosity. And it's still not as valued as dollars in the door today. We can't blame that kind of short-term thinking, that desire for instant gratification, on millennials. We have to own it and fix it. So what can we do? We know that the next generation will be influenced in their tendency to be generous by their role models, their family, their community. Let's make sure they're getting the right role models. Let's find a way to make our message permeate that generosity is important and long-term planning for generosity is the best way to sustain the future. Going back to my pessimistic dentist who felt the future was bleak and there was no room for generosity, what I said to him was, maybe your children will be the civics of the future. Like your parents and grandparents, a generation who had it tough, who lived through world wars, diseases, depressions. And maybe they'll do what many people in that generation did, engage with their community and work to change things so the future's better for their children. And he said, you're right. We shouldn't underestimate them. And we shouldn't underestimate ourselves. We are the rebels in my science fiction fantasy. We dare to plan for the future. We believe that it should be a right for everybody to aspire to leave a legacy and to know that they can. It's a simple message, but it's one that we have to make pitch perfect and crystal clear to rise above the noise. The future depends on what we do today. We have to work harder at finding long-term permanent solutions. Generosity has to be less about us and more about what's important for the world. And we have to bring our peers, our community, on board with that. Let's fight the potential of dystopia. Let's start to build a better world, a utopia. As charitable gift planners, as members of this movement we call CAGP, we have an abundance of knowledge and expertise to share. But more importantly, we have a vision of generosity that speaks to the future. Why don't we lead the way?